Hello, and welcome to another episode of Long Distance Shirt, GiftBasketsOverseas.com's podcast, where we talk to real people about the triumphs and tribulations in all kinds of long-distance relationships. Your host is Ali Winters, an international gift consultant who's found success in her own long-distance romances and friendships. Today we are discussing a topic we don't hear too much about: polyamory. We'll dive right into what polyamory is, how it works, who it's for, and why we even bringing it up here on Long Distance Shirt. Today, we are bringing back Sempi, part of the marketing team for DrinkableGifts.com, who has first-hand experience navigating her own polyamorous relationships. And Carmen Monroe. She spent 5 years in clinical mental health counseling before changing careers to bring her expertise to GiftBasketsOverseas.com. Let's jump right in. Take it away, Ali.
Hello, Sempi. Hello, Carmen. How are you today?
Hi, Ali. I'm doing well. How are you?
Just great. I'm so excited to talk about the polyamory today, really. You, Carmen?
Hi, Ali. Yeah, me too. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So let's start. And I guess the most interesting part of this is to introduce the notion of polyamory. I am also eager to know more about this, as well as our listeners. So, Sempi, since you have some experience in this sort of field, can you give us the understanding what your relationship is about? So, what is polyamorous in your relationship, so to say?
Sure. So I think one of the key things to remember is that poly isn't just one thing. Poly is sort of an umbrella term for a lot of other things. But to focus on what poly is, for me and in my relationships, plural, it's the key part of poly, is I practice this idea that I can love multiple people. So I approach my relationships very openly. I talk to all of my partners very, bluntly, and let them know that I'm of the belief that love is, sort of an open resource, right? You can love more than one person, but you don't have to love them all the same. So I do live with one partner. He's been my partner for a very long time, but he knows that I do occasionally have feelings for other people. Sometimes this means that, yes, I do date somebody else. Sometimes this means that I love another person and I express that, and it never really gets beyond more than, a really, really, really close friendship. Sometimes, it has in the past developed to where I have basically 2 boyfriends, which is awesome and a little bit exhausting, to be completely honest.
Mm-hmm. So how many partners do you have right now?
At the moment, I have just one romantic partner, so the person that I'm living with. But I do have kind of a friends with benefits situation. We've known each other for several years, and we both have romantic feelings for each other. We're both, very attached to one another, romantically and intellectually and spiritually. But we recognize that we can't date. We don't really have that time to commit to one another. He lives, on the other side of the country from me, and we just can't make is sort of a constant relationship work. So when we are able to see each other, we enjoy our time together when it can happen, and when it can't happen, we understand that, we have these other lives.
This is a great time to talk about defining things like love. Love is such a huge concept, and as Sempi's pointed out already, it's a big undertaking to nurture one love relationship, right? A lot of people are just like, oh my goodness, how can you possibly have more than one? It's hard enough.
I've been asked that once or twice.
But what I have seen and experienced in polyamorous relationships is that the idea of more than one love is exactly as Sempi said, more than one type of love. And many polyamorous people aren't necessarily talking about sex when they're talking about loving another person. And I think it's really important to consider people's needs, human needs. It's really easy to understand from a friendship perspective that a person's needs are never completely met only by one other person, right? Nobody has only one other person in their life for their entire life, right? Even parents, it's like you got at least two parents and grandparents, and what your family in the very broadest sense is a multiple love relationship. Your many friends, it can be argued, you are in polyamorous relationships already. You just define your affection and your levels of intimacy and your levels of closeness differently depending on their roles. And I believe a lot of polyamorous people might have only one partner for intercourse, but another partner who intellectually stimulates them or who is really good at non-sexual affection. Just cuddling. You've got the cuddle partner. And I think polyamorous people leave a lot more room in their lives for those kinds of definitions of love.
That's really interesting. And I would say that in Ukrainian, we have two words for loving. The one refers to those can be friends, to friends and our parents. This word is любити. And if we talk about this love as to our partners, this is another word, which is kohati. This distinction gives us the understanding in what kind of relationships we are. But still, in many other languages, the word love for both parents and friends and partners is one word.
I'm so glad that you brought this up. I did not know that about Ukrainian, but I often bring up a similar example in Greek. You know, in English, we just have this one word for love. But in Greek, there are many different words for many different kinds of love. There's agape, which is possibly the most well-known. That is a sort of a brotherly love. That's a love that you have in fellowship with your community. In fact, it's often raised to a spiritual or a religious idea, the idea of the agape love, which is a pure love that you just have in general for other humans. There's eros, which is that erotic love, that, you know, going to bed and getting your rocks off kind of love. That was they had a whole separate word for that.
We should bring that back.
Okay. And there is also a word for familial love. There's a word for the love of intellectual ideas. Philosophia is the love of wisdom from which we get the study of philosophy. And so many things, spin off from that. So they had words embedded in their language for all different kinds of love that I think point to human needs for different kinds of affection. We need safety and security of a long-term partner, I think, like a domestic partner. The one who makes the business of day-to-day life like okay to do. But we also need intellectual stimulation. We need affection. We need other things. We need, the joker in our lives, the one who just can make you laugh no matter what's going on. And polyamorous relationships can allow for people to define what those can be and look like.
Mm-hmm.
And Sempi, you mentioned you are in polyamorous relationship. What about your partner? Of course, he should be also polyamorous.
So that's the tricky thing with poly. He absolutely has the option, if he finds another kind of love that he wants to pursue. And I've tried to set him up on a couple of dates. None of them went well. Apparently I'm awful at picking out people for him. But he's a little bit older than me, and I've asked him a couple of times, why don't you have someone else? Because at this point in time, he doesn't, and he is just, he says to me that he just doesn't feel that need to go looking for someone else, and he feels at the moment totally satisfied with just me and his video games. I guess technically you could say he's dating his computer. but he has a lot of friendships. He has a lot of, online gaming activities, and he has me to come home to, and he's just sort of done. He, that's the end of his list. But, he has definitely been attracted to other people, and he has dated in the past, and he's fine to do that, but he's never had anything else long term. But that's by choice, I encourage it. He just not there for him. Whereas with me, he's definitely encouraging me as well, where I'm a little bit younger, and I have some interests that don't necessarily align with him. One of the best examples that I can state is that I love anime. Not sure how many people out there know what anime is. Google it, but carefully Google it. Really cool Japanese cartoons. There's also a dark side to it, so food
I
wars.
adore it.
Yes, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So he doesn't want to watch these things with me, but I don't want to watch them alone. So, I've had, friends that one of my dear friends is actually asexual. So they have no physical attraction to other people. They have no desire for this. What was it, Carmen? Eros? Is that, am I using the right Greek there?
Yes. They're not interested or attracted to or aroused by erotic love.
Right. I'm going to bring this word back. It's my new mission. So they don't have this eros love, but they have this affectionate love. So they'll watch anime with me and we'll just cuddle. That's what we do, right? That's all they want. They get that fulfillment from me. I get that fulfillment from them. And my partner, it doesn't have to watch this stuff. He doesn't. My nesting partner, my domestic partner doesn't have to watch the stuff he doesn't care about. So it's a win-win for everybody. But I understand how it can be difficult, because it's really hard to openly talk to your partner about having needs that they don't meet or they don't want to meet, maybe, while also not making them feel, as though they're not enough. Yes, exactly. And I think this is where a lot of people, particularly people who have only ever had monogamous relationships, sort of get hung up. Because, how do you have that kind of conversation? It doesn't come naturally. It's something you really have to work at.
Those are also skills that will benefit people in monogamous relationships, because we're also talking about, even if you're not looking outside of your monogamous relationship for another partner, it's still the case that there are times when people need to talk about what's missing. Otherwise, podcasts like these or articles about how to spice up your love life in the long term wouldn't be as popular as they are, right?
Sure.
So learning the scripts to talk about, at the base, we're talking about first step, learning how to make your partner feel good about the way that they do meet your needs and your desires, and learn how to talk about that first, and
Absolutely.
then move on to areas where you have need, but go in armed in that conversation with a real idea of what you actually need and what you actually want, and be able to express it and talk about why honestly.
It's never been easier to send family and friends their favorite drink or a new cocktail, no matter where they are in the world. With beer, wine, and liquor delivery to more than 175 countries, DrinkableGifts.com is ready to help you send a toast around the globe.
And if we talk about our needs, yes, being in some relationship with the person, what is the main difference between polyamory and maybe open relationship? Because I think open relationship presupposes that you have the freedom to choose.
Open relationships are definitely a form of polyamory. Polyamory is, being this sort of catch-all term, for a myriad of non-monogamous relationships. But what makes open relationships unique is that there is, as you mentioned, a freedom to do what you want, sort of without necessarily having to talk to your current partner or partners as much. I think one of the biggest examples that people instantly think of is open relationships can sometimes or oftentimes are people who are married or who are otherwise monogamous, but sometimes go and seek sexual fulfillment elsewhere.
Yeah.
And they have the freedom to do so. Because anytime you add extra people to your sexual love life, your eros love life, again, I'm really going to bring that word back, you do have, health concerns. And people in open relationships do talk about this. They do know their health boundaries beforehand, or they should be. If you're in a open relationship and you aren't talking about that beforehand, I encourage you to please go do that right now. Stop listening to us and go make sure you're safe.
Yeah, this is absolutely the right time for the PSA, because there are all sorts of risks out there, and we don't have to get too deep into like STDs and things, but there are safer ways to share your bed. Please practice them. Please get tested with your partners. Please be open about how many sexual partners you have. Please use protection, and don't let anyone stop you from doing those things.
Yes, that's very good advice. Also, I've done some research beforehand, and there are some terms which kind of define the notion of polyamory. These are mainly primary and secondary partners. So can you give us the understanding what is the main difference between them?
Oh, okay. So these terms, these primary and secondary partners terms, are sort of reference points, if you will. So it's natural when you date multiple people to sort of wonder, where do you fit in, sort of in a hierarchy, right, of relationships. Does this person come first? When do they come first, right? And so in a lot of polyamorous relationships, not all of them, but a good few, they sort of establish who their primary partner is, who is the person that has sort of takes precedence as the person they're going to put the needs of first, versus who is the secondary partner. Oftentimes there's this sort of natural shift. A lot of my friends who are polyamorous, it's sort of understood that the person they've been dating longest is the primary, and their secondary is the person they've been dating the least long. But it can also, it can feel a little, for me, these terms feel degrading. I personally try and stay away from them, because it's really hard for me personally to wrap my head around using them as not an insult. Intellectually, I understand that they're not. Intellectually, I understand this is just trying to make boundaries clear. Emotionally, they're very, very rough on me. So I stay away from them. And a lot of poly people do stay away from them, so that they're not making any one of their partners feel like other. But it is a necessary identifier, especially when you bring in things like polyamorous couples who have children, polyamorous couples who have lives. I'm very, very fortunate in having a workplace that doesn't care if I'm poly, so long as when I work and I excel at it. Right? But some workplaces do care. So you have to decide who is the partner you can be public about, and who is the partner that only your intimate circle gets to know about. And that's often the lines that are sort of drawn when people discuss their primary partner and their secondary partner.
This is a great place to just kind of sneak in that, polyamory is not new, and we should talk about that more later. But then, so you've got your domestic partner, and then you've got the date night partner. And maybe you've negotiated that with that person, you might not even be having intercourse or sex. Maybe you only have oral sex. Maybe you just have a really fun, stimulating date night, and this is the person that you go do the stuff that your partner's not interested in. Maybe you watch porn, or maybe you go to a strip club. I mean, seriously, we need to learn to be less shameful and open about kind of these taboo things that we want, especially when things are getting into a rut, right? And so that might be the shorthand for what we call the secondary partner. That's the person where you have a little bit of kind of maybe taboo fun, or whatever you're not getting at home on a regular basis. Sometimes you just need a little injection of something new. So that's one way to define it. Simpi has also mentioned, again, maybe you have that similar domestic partner and your asexual cuddle partner. And again, that's not an intercourse relationship, but it is a very deep level of intimacy. And it can include physical affection, right?
Mm-hmm. And I remember actually Sampi mentioning her partner being a nesting partner. So, yeah.
Yes. It's a nesting partner is basically another term for domestic partner, or for somebody who is, I personally am not I'm not sure that I'll ever marry, just because I don't feel the need to do that. I'm not religious, and legally it doesn't really make sense for me to marry. But this is my forever human, right? And one of my friends actually a couple of years ago introduced this nesting partner term to me. So I don't know how new or old it is, but I liked that because it's very much what we're doing. We're building sort of this core foundation that no matter where else we go to explore for romantic love or adventures in life, we have this core, home, this nest to come back to. So it's my nesting partner. He's my guy.
Nice. Okay, and some other terms that I found. So, can you give us the understanding what they mean, especially triad? Yes, metamour, paramour, and unicorn, which is really sounds strange.
The mythical unicorn. Okay, so I'm going to talk about triads and unicorn at once because they kind of go together. Unicorns. How to describe unicorns. I will first off say that if you are in polyamorous circles, maybe you don't use the term unicorn so much. It's actually kind of insulting. But when somebody uses that, what they're talking about is wanting to find this magical, perfect person to fit them. Traditionally speaking, a unicorn is a female who is bisexual and willing to enter an existing male-female couple to date both of them. Emotionally, for me, if you're looking for a unicorn, you're looking for somebody who fits you and fits you perfectly. And if you're a unicorn hunter, you're being called a unicorn hunter is as negative as being called a slut. Oftentimes.
Okay, I can buy that. Yeah. I can buy that. It's certain. I mean, two completely different terms. And actually, I really want to talk about the word slut a little later after we define these other terms. But yeah, I can see how it has the same vitriol in the polyamorous world,
which is, I think, where the term triad comes in. This is the better term. This is the more inclusive term. So a triad is simply three people who have managed to find sort of what unicorn hunters are looking for, but it's not specific to bisexual women being added to an existing couple, right? A triad is simply a successful relationship built amongst three people.
And we know of all sorts of examples of this, and some are more honest than others, but there are triads built of, say, a married couple and someone's other partner, male or female. One partner has the other, but there are examples of where this one married partner knows that is the case and perhaps encourages that. There are cases where, as Sempi has already mentioned, that someone's not interested in sex, as in the case with asexual people. They might be a great nesting partner and want a great nesting partner, but encourage you to go have your eros relationship elsewhere and be very good friends with that partner. It is also the case, there comes a stage of life, sometimes earlier than others for some people, where sex is no longer possible. And if you've been in a long-term loving relationship and your partner finds themselves, and you find yourselves in such a situation, you are then faced with the question of what to do. You love your partner and your partner loves you, and now probably a big part of your lives, that erotic component, for some reason or another, physical or otherwise, is gone, but you still love each other. That's a very practical and difficult to discuss kind of question that can lead to the kind of triad that we're discussing here.
Yeah,
And there are plenty of others.
It sounds like a new topic for our podcast.
Yes.
Well, we will think about it, surely.
Mhm.
Okay, so we are left with metamour and paramour, yeah?
So metamour and paramour are basically really fancy terms for a very simple concept. So, and let me see if I can get this right on the first try. Paramour is your other partner, right? So you can talk about, I can say the sentence, my nesting partner and my paramour, the other person I'm dating, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A metamour is your partner's other partner. So for instance, if my nesting partner were dating someone, I could say, my nesting partner's metamour, right? Or my metamour would be referencing my nesting partner's metamour. I have been polyamorous for going on, now, 7 years. I still mix those up, so I don't use them, right? I tend to use people's names. I find that much easier. But you can't always do that, right? For instance, my partner has asked me not to mention his name on this podcast, so I'm not. And that's why I'm saying nesting partner and things like that. And there are other situations where that's the case. You may be in a social situation where everybody there knows about your polyamory, but they don't necessarily know about your metamour's polyamory. And so you respect them by using this term or by talking around it by saying the person my partner is dating. But that's a very long-winded thing. So people who, are more prone to having to be discreet use these terms. So if you hear that, that's what they're talking about, simply the various people in their relationship, paramour being their romantic partners, metamour being their partners, romantic partners.
And I think there is this idea that, people kind of maybe do not want to disclose their names for some reason or to disclose the type of their relationship. Of course, it's normal to keep something like in secret, but do you think that this presumably can be because there is an idea that somebody is cheating on somebody? And people simply do not want other people to know that they are cheated?
So, yes, there is this huge stigma surrounding polyamorous relationships that they're really no better than cheating. I should just go on the record saying that in polyamorous relationships, in ethical polyamorous relationships, there is informed consent from all parties. You cannot cheat if you're adhering to the rules stated in your relationship. But this can be really hard and awkward to explain, especially to people who are a little more set in the ways of what's the social norm, which for the US right now is monogamy, right? So a lot of people won't mention to say their parents or their grandparents that they're polyamorous simply because they don't want to have this exhausting conversation explaining, no, mom, I'm not cheating on my partner. He knows, he's cool with it. Like that just having to say that is often not even worth the effort. So they just don't talk about it openly. I didn't for a very, very long time, especially when I was in college, because there's also this idea that if you're poly, you're okay with cheating. I am not okay with cheating. I am not the person you should confide in and say, oh, I've been cheating on my wife. I will tell on you. I will happily and eagerly tell on you because your wife deserves to know. She deserves that respect. So I, for the longest time, especially in college, I just wasn't telling people I was poly because when I did do it, it put me in a lot of weird situations where I found out things that I didn't know how to deal with at the time. I know how to deal with now, somebody telling me they're cheating. But at the time, I just didn't know. I was really young. I didn't know, how to talk about it. I wasn't quite secure in, who I was as a polyamorous person. I hadn't met a lot of other poly people. So I really struggled, especially early on. Was I a cheater too? Just because I believed that I could love multiple people at once. And that's it, it's a really hard thing to talk about, especially with people who are closed-minded, and especially when you're still finding your own footing in the polyamorous world.
Yeah.
This is a really good place to bring up a couple of things. And the first is, Sempi said a phrase that is incredibly important and that we really should deconstruct. She said the phrase ethical slut. And so this is my plug because it's absolutely required reading, even if you're just curious about polyamorous relationships and spicing up the bedroom, particularly when it comes to the erotic side of things. But I would also submit that learning to talk openly and honestly and without shame about the erotic side of things can definitely improve communications in similar aspects in other areas. But anyway, the book I'm recommending is called The Ethical Slut, A Guide to Infinite Sexual Possibilities. It's by Dossie Easton and Janet Hardy. It is, like I said, absolutely required reading, and the other ethical sluts in the polyamory world will know this book, and they will work by its precepts. And some of the things that they will talk about in this book are open and honest communications with your partners. Going back around to cheating, we often use these words, and I'll go back to like love and intimacy and affection and cheating, as if everybody has the same definition of it, and we don't. We all don't. And we all need to talk about that with our partners. I'll go ahead and make a couple of admissions. I've been in polyamorous relationships. I prefer polyamory. I would really like to have a good domestic triad. But at the same time, my libido isn't usually in line with another sexual partner's. I most of the time run more towards the asexual range when it comes to erotic intimacy. I can be moved to other sides of the spectrum, and that's a lot of fun, but another healthy sexual partner probably deserves and should have a sexual partner besides me. Okay? So if I were to define cheating, and I have before in other relationships, it is not necessarily cheating on me if you have sex with another person. I need to know that that other person is whatever their disease status is, and I need to know that you're practicing safe sex with that partner, because I'm assuming that I am occasionally intimate with you. But that is something definitely that needs talking about and negotiating right off of the bat, because in that case, if you haven't told me about your outside sexual partner, or if you didn't use protection when you slept with them, you have violated our agreement. Then you have cheated on me.
That's a really fresh idea, I would say.
But I'm just me, and not every partner can accept that, and I have to leave room. If I'm going to negotiate for something like that, right, I need to be aware of who you're sleeping with and how you're sleeping with them, because I can't always provide you adequate sex, probably. Then
so here another question arises. Will you be jealous?
I haven't been in the past. I know that that's very difficult for people to understand, but I highly value autonomy. And to a certain extent, I'm very introverted. And I need to have the ability to move closer and further away and closer and further away based on my needs to recharge my own energy in order to be able to give enough to our relationship. And some partners are need more than that. They deserve more than that. If I might not be a good fit for them, I'm aware of that. Other partners, they also need that kind of room. But that's the point, is that my relationship doesn't look like anybody else's relationships, and that's okay. What is most important is that partners have come together and said, this is what cheating looks like for me. I've known people who are absolutely, you cannot have sex with other people, but that just means penetrative intercourse. Yes, you can sort of, let's air quotes, play around with other people and things like that.
I think touching on this jealousy question that Allie brought up, I think it's important to note that jealousy is not necessarily a bad thing, and it's not necessarily a deal breaker. Carmen's mentioned that she hasn't felt jealous in the past, clearly acknowledging that she might feel jealous in the future, and that's okay. It's just something that you need to be able to talk about. And there's also a little bit of a difference between, say, jealousy and envy. And I know that
That's
we often...
a really good distinction.
Yeah, we often use the words interchangeably. I don't blame people for using the words interchangeably, but there is a difference. And the difference is that when you're jealous of something, you have this internal fear that something's being taken away from you, or because somebody has something, you're not getting it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when you have envy, you see something, you want something, but you don't want the other person to not have it, right? So in polyamory, this often shows up as, maybe you've had this relationship with somebody for years, and they find a new partner, and they discover a new something that they do together. This something can be as innocuous as going to a museum and as erotic as a fantastic sex position. Right? And you never knew you wanted this thing. You've never experienced this thing. But you see your partner doing it, enjoying it with someone else, and suddenly you want it too. Right? That's okay. Just tell them. Just be honest with them. Hey, I saw you doing this with your other partner. Is that something we could try to do together too? Right? Is that something we can now bring into our relationship now that I know that it's even an option? It can cause your relationship to actually grow. Jealousy and envy, as contrary to popular opinion as it may be, can be healthy. It can spark you to talk about more openly things that you weren't talking about before. It's just a matter of understanding, where your place is in the relationship. Right? And maybe being jealous can cause you to realize you need to have this conversation. If you're feeling jealous, if you're feeling like you're afraid something's being taken from you, that's really the time you need to evaluate, do I really know where I stand? Do I really feel secure? And just have that conversation with your partner. Hey, look, I'm a little scared right now. Can we work on us? Can we work on my security? And if you're feeling envious, then, asking them if you can bring those new things into your relationship. The answer may not always be yes. You may have to find somebody else to fulfill that. Maybe they only like museums with their other partner, right? That's fine. Some people have different chemistry. Maybe you need to go out and find the person you have that chemistry with. It's all just a matter of being open and honest rather than ashamed.
That's a really good point. I should admit.
This is a really great point to go back again to that level of introspection and honesty and remembering that emotions are indicators, okay? As often as possible, even when it's uncomfortable, we can try to embrace those emotions and understand what they're trying to indicate to us. I try to think of emotions like that as part of the dashboard lights on your car. When the check something light comes on your car, you don't just ignore it, hopefully. Hopefully you kind of look under the hood or get a diagnostic test going or whatever, and you figure out what's wrong with the car, what it needs to turn that indicator off. And emotions are very much the same way. And like Sempi has mentioned, they present opportunities for expansion and growth. And they also represent opportunities to go to a partner, whether they're a friend or an intimate partner or anybody, and be vulnerable. Saying I'm scared is hard. Saying I want something different is hard. But when you can be honest about I'm scared, instead of going to your partner like accusatory or with blame, you really can open up a better path where they are able to lose some of their defensiveness too. And you're able to say stuff like, I wasn't prepared for feeling the way that I did when we got into this relationship, or when you got into your relationship. I wasn't prepared for what I didn't know was missing.
Those are really good thoughts, Carmen. Thank you for that. Sempi, do you have any more thoughts on societal views you have to overcome with polyamory?
Goodness. I'm gonna start. You and I touched on this when you asked about even doing this podcast, and we talked about sort of this notion of how the stigma for men and women in polyamory is sort of opposite what it is in monogamy, in that when a man dates one woman, it's, or marries, commits to one woman, we have these we call them jokes, but I don't think they are, where she's the ball and chain and he's being drugged down and he's not having fun anymore. But if he's dating multiple women, right, or multiple partners even, then, oh man, what a stud and what fun he's having. And look at him able to juggle all of this. He's on top of the world.
Yeah.
The opposite is true for women, right? I've definitely experienced, people who have told me, oh, you should settle down. Oh, your life will improve if you just pick one guy. Oh, you haven't found the right one yet. Because, they think of a woman dating one guy as successful. She's done it. That's the goal. But a woman dating multiple partners, oh, look at her. She's so lost. She's so confused. And that's really hurtful.
Such a slut.
Yes. What a whore. Scarlet A on my chest. Right?
I mean, but it's true, right? We definitely, we can't not talk about it, can we?
Yes.
Oh no, I think we have to. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, wow, it's such a I think you hear it, you see it, you can go online and you can see it. You can see it even outside of a discussion of polyamorous relationships. You can see it in the first girl in high school that everybody finds out has had sex even when she didn't. Right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm being very generalized here when I say we. I'm talking about we as a society, and because I'm a Westerner, I'm definitely rooted in Western society when I say this we. But we shame people for loving sex, or even the perception that they might enjoy it.
How dare?
Right?
Like,
the thing that got us all here, by the way.
if you're here, it's because at least your dad had an orgasm.
You're right.
And you know what? Your mom should have too, honestly speaking. So
Oh no.
I hope she did. I really hope she did.
And that's I think that's the discrepancy, especially in Western culture. Men are, encouraged, allowed. This is a thing they're supposed to do. Boys will be boys, as they say.
Oh.
But women are they're not supposed to enjoy this. They're not supposed to own their sexuality. This goes back to terms of being a virgin. I hate this word, virgin, right? And I'm not to say that that this idea that you've never had sex doesn't exist. You can certainly have never had sex before and be inexperienced sexually, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Where I start hating it is this idea that your worth comes from that you are somehow better because nobody's ever touched you before. Inversely, you're somehow worse because you're a slut and you get around.
Less pure.
Right? And
That
that's
somehow your purity
so
is
dubious.
attached to how many times you have been penetrated.
And that's insane to me. But it's
And
still something
once
we're working against.
is too much, or it can be,
Mm-hmm.
stereotypically speaking. Right? The idea that you're lesser or tainted is tied up in this idea of wanting more than one partner. And this is why I love, and I'm going to plug again, The Ethical Slut, A Guide to Infinite Sexual Possibilities by Donnie Easton and Janet Hardy. These authors, they want us to reclaim the term slut and redefine it as, quote, a person of any gender who has the courage to lead life according to the radical proposition that sex is nice and pleasure is good for you. And I find it very difficult that under honest and fair and ethical terms, the way that they prescribe within the book, difficult to argue with the idea that sex is good and pleasure is good for you. There is a lot of research that suggests that good sex makes you live longer, that orgasms release all sorts of happy things in your brain, that you should have more of, and not just orgasms, affection, human touch.
We'll point out that good sex can be your 30 minutes of cardio for the day.
Absolutely.
And, you know, who doesn't want more cardio in their lives?
So there's definitely this dichotomy with, you know, the idea of having multiple partners for intimacy, whatever that means for you. And that does get wrapped up with the stereotype of shame and sluthood. And it's there for guys too. Like there's this thing about the playa, you know, hate the playa, don't hate the game. Is that how it goes?
Yes.
Mhm.
But it's really only accepted to a point with guys. Like
Yes.
if you're in high school, if you're in college, like, yeah, way to go you. But once you cross that like 30s line, the big 3-0, right? Then it stops.
You need to grow up.
Yes.
Like,
and
your sexuality is supposed to be drying up by now, except Viagra.
you know, and I think that we need to, as I'm going to plug it again, and I'm going to mention that we're not being paid to plug it, but as the Ethical Slut mentions, you know, we should just get to this notion, this genderless notion that sex is good, and being honest and open and healthy about it, and that does mean protecting yourself. I'm going to plug that again because I can't plug it enough. Then you're doing a good thing, right? Ultimately, you fucking 100 guys, if that's what you want to do, if you've got the stamina to do that, that's not hurting anybody else, provided you're doing it ethically, right? And this idea that we're going to be judged by it for what we essentially do in our free time is absurd and harmful, and it's causing a lot of unnecessary shame and unnecessary depression in people who are simply struggling to find out how to live their best life and how to love, right? And that's just...
And we all want that. We all want and need love and affection in our lives, and none of us comes with a manual for how to do it, or, you know, some, you know, definitive guide on how is the best way for you. It's different for all of us.
I should interject there that I think it's crazy only when you apply it to somebody else. If those are your personal values, if you have sat there and decided that for you it matters the number of people you've slept with, that's fine. You can base your worth on whatever you want to base your worth on, provided it's only you. You don't get to force that on other people. You don't get to shame other people for finding their self-worth from other things, right? Some guys think that they're macho because they can score a touchdown. Yeah, I think I said that sentence right. I don't do sports. Other guys base their, you know, self-worth on their ranking in Overwatch, right? Both are fine. Both are valid. You should feel like a badass for either, but you shouldn't shame somebody for not living up to your own personal standards.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder, Simpy. And I don't mean to call anyone crazy if you know, if their self-worth, you know, is tied up in those things. I absolutely agree. You know, it is when you apply that to others outside of your own dynamic or your own life that it really becomes problematic. Do the things that feel good for you within reason, in healthy and honest ways.
Yes. Yeah.
Agreed. I have really, really enjoyed being a part of this conversation. I really hope that it is helpful to listeners, whether they're curious about polyamorous relationships or not. I hope that there are useful things here for any relationships, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have been here, Allie.
Yes, I absolutely just ditto on all of that. This has been, you know, Allie, when you asked me if I would come on and do this, I don't think that I anticipated it getting, you know, quite so deep, quite so personal, but I like where it went. I want to echo Carmen's sentiment that just because we talk about communication styles or love styles in the context of polyamory, it doesn't mean that it doesn't apply elsewhere. So even if you're listening to this and you're going, nope, polyamory isn't for me, that's fine. That's absolutely fine.
Totally valid, yeah.
You live your best life, but maybe take a minute to think about the other things that we talked about, emotional techniques for dealing with jealousy and versus envy, you know, and how to open up those lines of communication. Because at the end of the day, all of this is about learning to love, learning to open yourself up, and learning to do it better.
Yes, 100%. And thank you very much for sharing your expertise. And I totally benefited from it, not only as a host, but just, getting to know something is always great. So thank you so much for coming.
Yes.
I hope to see you again in some future episodes, maybe, if you agree.
Anytime.
Yeah, it's been a real great pleasure, and I would love to do more.
Yep. So thank you so much. I hope to see our listeners again in a month's time. And of course, we will meet as usually at our podcast Long Distance Short. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Long Distance Short, GiftBasketsOverseas.com's podcast with real people and real long-distance relationships. Make sure to subscribe and keep tuning in for new episodes every month. If you have any questions or ideas for a future podcast, make sure to drop us a line at podcast@giftbasketsoverseas.com. That is podcast@giftbasketsoverseas.com.